Hi everybody, I'm Lex
And I'm William.
from Gentry Collectables, and today we thought we'd do a little video on just crystal, some of the finer points. So, crystal, name brands to look for if you're looking at stickers, if you're looking at the original piece in its vintage box, you want to look for names like Wedgwood, Lalique, Swarovski, Tiffany, Steuben, Baccarat, 4 Wedgwood crystal goblets from the 1950s. You could be looking at $25 a goblet. Waterford, very important. I didn't say Waterford. Okay. Yeah, that's if you see a Waterford mark, box or sticker, absolutely pick that up. So these are some of the most popular ones, some of the better ones, and of course there are others. But if you're just trying to keep an eye out and keep a few names in mind, those are some of the names to keep in mind. When you are choosing crystal to buy, you should pick it up and always touch it. Always actually run your fingers. So even though I'm looking at this and checking for damage as I'm looking at it, it's entirely possible that there might be a tiny crack or a tiny chip or a tiny fissure that my eyes won't notice or see, but my fingers will. So take the time to just rub your fingers all over the pieces, especially over the bases, things like that. You're going to feel if it's damaged at all. Always take the time to do that because damaging crystal lowers the quality of crystal. And I actually have out some glass and some crystal pieces, and we'll go over which is which. But I just want to mention that you don't want damage. You don't want cracks, you don't want chips, and your fingers can tell you that more than your eyes can generally, especially if you're in low lighting conditions or all sorts of things. So how to tell if something's crystal? Crystal has 24% lead minimum. It has to have 24% lead in order to be called crystal. That's why we call it lead crystal instead of glass. That's so pretty.
Yeah, it got an iridescence to it.
But it's not crystal. So
I knew that.
Lead in crystal makes crystal heavy. So that's something to think about, that when you're picking up the object, if it has a lead content that's high enough or very high, it should be heavy. Lead also makes it bounce the light. It allows the lead within the glass allows light to refract. So you'll see prisms of rainbow colors dancing from a piece if it's actual crystal. Whereas glass, you won't. You can hold it up to the sunlight all day, and much like a glass pane window, you're never going to see prismatic refracted light coming through there in the entire color of the spectrum. You will just see white light. And I don't know, we'll have to try to maneuver some of the pieces so maybe people can see the difference at some point. But so that's one of the things lead does. So when you're buying crystal, that's something you can look for. Is it bouncing little rainbow prisms everywhere? Because it should be. Higher quality crystal like Waterford can have a lead content as high as 32%. And that is very heavy. So you'll know when you pick it up. Crystal is easy to cut because lead is added. That's one of the reasons they're doing it. It makes it easier to work with, easier to mold, fashion, cut. It also makes it somewhat more fragile and very prone to becoming cloudy. So don't put your crystal in a dishwasher. I would say don't even put water in a crystal vase ever. Don't do it. You can do false flowers. You can do non-moisture foam frogs. You can do all sorts of things that you're never risking ongoing damage to your crystal. And if you have a crystal bowl, I would say don't put anything in your crystal bowl. It's beautiful as it is. You don't need marbles in there or candy or anything that might scratch it like your car keys.
It's its own accessory.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Leave it alone, especially if it's high quality crystal. So glass, when they're making glass hardens much faster. If you've ever been to a glass blower or glass maker, one of the reasons crystal's so much easier to work with is it hardens slower as the crafters are making it. And glass usually has a lot of strengthening materials in it too. So, like potassium carbonate, the silica itself is done a little bit differently.
So slightly more durable.
I'm thinking when you're looking at a crystal water glass versus a water or a glass water glass.
Okay.
One of the ways you can tell the difference is the rim of a water glass will sometimes be reinforced. You almost see a thickened rim around it. And that has to do with the way they're making it and the way the glass hardens so fast and they're trying to make it strong and all these things. So that's something, if you get an eye for it, you can kind of look out for. Crystal can be much finer. It can be much more delicate than glass can. When you're thinking about pieces to buy, don't buy punch bowls, not right now. Just in general. Let us tell all of our more elite seeking patrons out there.
This is not a punch bowl. This is a frog.
That is a little frog. That is a little glass frog. But punch bowls have really fallen out of favor. It's 2018 through 2020. It's 2022 now. They're still not in favor. Even if they have the glasses with them, no one seems to use them anymore. And then we had the COVID thing. No one's entertaining large groups. So I would avoid punch bowls. If you have a choice between a punch bowl and a vase, get the vase. If you have a choice between a punch bowl and a bowl, get the bowl. It's going to accrue more value, at least in the short term, and it's a little more in favor in the markets right now. Formal dining pieces always do well. Decorative table pieces always do well when they're crystal. Standard glass is usually made with things like sand, soda, ash, and limestone, so it's not as clear. I think I might have misspoke earlier. Crystal is made with lead oxide and silica and potassium carbonate, so it's very, very clear. And yeah, again, due to that difference in chemical composition between the two things, crystal can be heated at lower temperatures, and that allows the glass blower, the maker, the former, to more easily work with it, versus glass, which has to be a higher working temperature and hardens really, really, really fast. Just trying to give some people some background if this is something they're into, so that they can have a better kind of understanding of it. I notice a lot when appraisers or people on YouTube and stuff are talking about crystal, they just go, look for the rainbows. Is it heavy? Well, why not explain why it's heavy?
Right.
Give people a basic understanding of the same things a museum appraiser or a college-educated appraiser would understand about these objects, what to look for. And it will actually help your background in other objects as well.
Plus, I don't know about you, but we go into some of these places and looking for antiques, and it's dark in there. So you can't always...
dark in some estate sales.
You can't get the reflection.
You're in the middle of the house, middle of the room. The lights are off. It's usually the middle of the day. It's an agent seller, an estate sale company. They don't want the lights on. They don't want that bill running while they're about to sell the house. Right? So it's always kind of dark. Or garages, basements, barns. If you're more into like really seeking out those vintage kind of pieces that need to be maybe cleaned up or worked with. Or if you're in a more rural area or setting, if you're going to garage sales, a lot of time it'll be in the garage with no, of course, overhead lighting inside of someone's garage. Just a little bit of daylight coming from where the garage is open. So if it's something in the back of the room, almost no light to test whether or not, say, it has rainbow reflections. But you can look for things like, is it very, very clear? Even in low lighting conditions, is it very heavy?
Right.
Is it well made? All these things. So, again, glass is very little metal content, which means that light is going to pass through it without refracting at all. That's why we use glass for windows. Soda lime, which is used in glass composition, actually lacks all, refracting abilities. So crystal refracts. Crystal will give off those beautiful little prisms if you have some light and if you hold it in the right position. Sometimes you have to move it around a little bit. Don't think that, just because you don't see it right off, that it's not at all.
Okay.
Because sometimes you gotta hit it in the right spot. I don't mean to
gotta get the right
my
angle.
mind is not in the gutter, I swear. And again, you should see a rainbow hue. Now, William keeps handling that piece. That is a glass piece.
Glass.
I don't want you to get confused. That is because it's an iridescent glass. It's a form of carnival glass where they've used salts in the creation in order to give it that kind of rainbow effect. That's not the kind of rainbow effect we're talking about when we're talking about crystal. When we're talking about a crystal rainbow effect, I don't know if I can get it to scatter light because there's no light. It's not kind of see it on his hands a little bit? Where you're seeing the entire Roy G. Biv spectrum popping off of that on his palm, mostly. Where you see the red, the yellow, the blues, that's crystal. And that's the kind of refraction we're talking about. Not necessarily a refraction from a piece of carnival glass.
Right. The carnival glass is generally you can see it without the light.
It's on the surface. Without any light. That's a great point to make. So, and then there are sound differences. The amount of times I have heard people that are so experienced, and a lot of times, I don't know how many appraisers I have come across, when someone has decided that they are an expert and they are super experienced, and they know it better than anyone else, and they've seen a million pieces like that. Well, that tends to lead to bias. It tends to lead to mistakes, and it also ingrains in their mind they might have mislearned a few things here or there, and they will never be open to relearning them, growing in their craft, or learning more, which is unfortunate. So I will hear appraisers all the time, especially if they were taught like the 1950s through the 1990s in any college sort of venue, go, there's no difference in sound because they were taught there wasn't. There is. It's a scientific audio engineering fact. There is a difference in sound between if you like ping or ting glass versus crystal. And I feel like I need to point that out because people are always saying, well, I heard it was an old wives' tale. It isn't. Now, I could explain why people might say that. So when tapped, crystal will create like a bell-like tone. It's like a dull chiming. And it's not very dull. It can actually be very bright. We talk about the bright ping that crystal will make when it's like tapped on or flicked. Let's not do it here.
Okay.
And I'll talk about why. But the sound is usually subtle, or I should say when glass is pinged, it's subtle, it's dull, it sounds like a thud a little bit. Your ear's not really going to pick up on it very well. Crystal is the opposite of that. You hear, it's a slightly prolonged sort of ringing sound. It reverberates rather than clunking, I guess would be another way to put it. Like when you have a crystal wine glass or say a water goblet with you can get your finger wet and run your finger around the rim and you're going to get that tone, that singing tone. It's the same idea. You won't get that with glass, no matter how hard you try. So there is a difference in sound because there's a difference in the composition of the materials.
That makes sense.
So it's just basic science, and I'm so sick of having to correct people on this. It does sound different. You can learn to tell the difference. It can be tricky, I will say that. It takes experience, but it's a real thing. Lots of people will inaccurately teach others that it isn't true. And one of the reasons they've been taught that is because when they learned it, they were taught not to do it, usually because you shouldn't rely on it because pinging or tinging a piece could damage it.
Right.
So why risk it at all? There's so many other ways to assess the object. So fair enough. I get it. You were taught not to do it because of that. But let's have some common sense. You cannot do it and still know that it's an accurate fact. that there is a difference in the sound that you could use if you knew what you were doing. And then sometimes you'll have object appraisers. They'll be told not like by their college lecturers not to use this technique because a lot of people are tone deaf. So the teacher, the lecturer, has no way to know if the student learning to be an appraiser of objects has an ear for pitch and scale and tone and all these things. And you're not going to waste time trying to figure that out because everyone hears differently. So an appraiser's teacher, might say, don't bother with that. It's not true. Everyone hears different. That is true, but what they're actually saying is if you had a trained ear, you could absolutely tell. But I have no way of knowing if all 30 of you have a trained ear or not. Let's move on. Right. So it's an actual thing. You can get to know the pitch. Lead and silica does sound different to people who have experience, for hearing the difference in frequencies and resonance. It should sound like a ringing bell. It's something that you could read on a meter. You could, you can test this in a lab. It absolutely has a different frequency than glass. So examples of prices on different pieces of crystal. Well, first of all, there's things like hearth or floor vases. So here, I don't know if William can show you without breaking everything on the table. Maybe not.
I've been trying to avoid it because it's large.
So here we have what's called a table vase. This is a crystal table vase. Now, it's under 2 feet tall.
Right. It's
actually probably under, 20 inches, 19 inches. I haven't actually measured it.
Sounds about right.
But if it were, a little bit taller, generally 2 feet tall, maybe a little bit taller than that, bigger, it could be a floor vase or a hearth vase. They're literally made to go on the floor with long stem flowers. So, or just to be showpieces, say, around a beautiful fireplace.
Okay.
That's going to be worth a little bit more money than, say, a smaller table vase. Generally, the same manufacturer, same quality, same style, all those other things. All else being equal, the larger piece is going to be worth more. So, say a big floor vase from 1920 to 1925 could be as much as $1,200.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So if you ever see one of those lying around at Goodwill,
don't be afraid of
for $20,
weight.
grab it and bring it home. Somebody is going to want to help you get that item in their hands later. A smaller, say, side table bowl or from 1880, so say much earlier, you could be looking at as little as 300 for a smaller piece, even though it's, say, 30 to 40 years older. Again, depends on quality, manufacturer, all these other things. But I'm trying to give kind of an idea of how much size can matter with these objects when it comes to decor objects. And again, an assessment is going to depend on design, clarity, desirability, how many people want Waterford that year versus Baccarat, things like that. Condition, absolutely no damage. Is it molded or cut glass? What's the quality of the maker? What's the lead content involved? And I want to mention on the video, when we talk to our specialty patrons, so we're dealing with people that say have collections of crystal, always reminding them to schedule their insurance updates on things like, say, their crystal pieces in their crystal collection, say their oil paintings. When pieces are aging in 50 and 100-year increments, same thing can be said for a vast copper collection. And that when you should be updating those objects or putting it into your iPhone to remind you to call your insurer to do an update on the value should be at the 50 and 100-year marks of those things when it comes to specialty metals or crystals, things of that nature. The market spike for these sorts of objects in what are known as revival events. So that's every 50 years or every 100 years. So you'll see something like rose gold becoming more expensive as it hits its revival at the new 50-year mark, and that market will spike, which is why we say that's when you want your insurer to reassess the value. When it's hitting that market spike, so that you're completely covered and don't have to have anxiety about that because you forgot to do it for, say, 10 or 20 years. This is also something to think about for when to buy and when to sell things like crystal, right?
Right.
So crystal was high in the early 20th century market. It's still holding pretty steady. I would say don't sell your crystal pieces at the 48-year mark instead of the 50-year mark of their revival, or the 95-year mark instead of the 100-year mark of their revival. That's not a good time to sell. You're going to be taking a loss on that. Maybe you've acquired an estate. Hold on to it for 5 years or 3 years. If that's all you need to hold on to it for, it's worth the storage to do that, to then sell when the market spikes. If you're, looking to intelligently amass a collection yourself for purposes of investment, buy when the markets are low, right? Don't buy at the peaks.
Right.
So when was the piece made? How old is it? When is the next market rise for objects made of that material? These are the things you need to assess before deciding to buy or sell your pieces, or how much or when to pay to, say, add more pieces to a collection. And I feel like everybody should know that, not just people that deal with this sort of thing all the time. It's kind of basic information, but they had to be taught it. So it's the same thing. Why not teach everyone the same thing so that they too can maybe start amassing a beautiful crystal collection? We want to help you. I like to say that.
That's the goal.
William and I would like to help you. And there's no reason, whoever you are, whatever your budget range is, these are beautiful items. There's always a way to get into collecting things that you love. And this is important stuff to think about. If not now, maybe 10 years from now, you're going to be grateful you had this information because you were just getting started. And you can make the same wise decisions based on the same insightful information that, say, our specialty elite patrons have. Or people with a lot of experience that are very used to being around this sort of thing have. There's nothing we like more than when somebody becomes comfortable with going into a very, say, posh estate sale for the first time, or a high bidders charity auction for the first time, and feels like they can safely and securely just make good decisions and blend right in and know what they're doing. And there's no reason everyone can't do that. And they're fun, and you get to learn so much, right? These are pleasant, things to go do.
That's why we do these videos. Every
one of those people, I don't care if you're at Sotheby's looking at what looks like the fanciest millionaire in his little suit with his adorable little wooden mallet, right? He had to learn his craft. Right. Everyone has to learn.
Gotta start somewhere.
So you gotta start somewhere, and these you can learn. You can easily learn what's worth money and what isn't, and how to begin a collection of your own, or when you should invest, or when you should divulge objects because, say, you want more liquid finances.
Right.
There's no reason everyone shouldn't have that in their lives. Again, don't put water in these objects. It'll lead to clouding. I'm just going to say it. I don't care how much you want to use it. Get used to fake florals.
Yeah, fake flowers work wonders.
Or just leave it. Yeah. Leave the beautiful piece of crystal out on a table. Everyone's going to enjoy it. Put things around it. You don't have to put things inside of it. Bold. Don't put anything inside of it.
Don't put chocolate without the wrapper. Don't do it.
More specialty information when it comes to crystal in particular. 2019 USA was the lead importer internationally of all lead crystal. They took 23.3% of the entire international market. That should give you an idea of, I can't speak to this year without you paying me quite a bit for my personal knowledge of the events. And I'm not a stock exchanger, and I'm not assessing international markets, right? So, but when people do, so as recently as 2019, steady market was trending up, and the USA, specifically North America, was really into the idea of getting their hands on more, while places like France were the lead exporters, which again means that there's a market for the creation of it if France can create it to export and sell. And they sold, $45.3 million worth of crystal they took 23.8% of the entire international market selling crystal. Lead crystal, not like crystal rocks. Like right. That's something else entirely, which by the way, also trending up, especially significantly in North America and the West Coast, oddly. But the crystal trend holding steady, colored glass and crystal is doing well. I'm not going to tell you to go, spend your college tuition on it. That's not a good idea, but it's not a bad investment right now. When you do, if you want to learn how to figure out if something's a bad investment, here's a trick for everybody. When you go to Google and you write in the question, when should I sell my lead crystal? Or what is my lead crystal worth? And you write that question in Google. And you suddenly see all these websites that have things like, ignore the appraiser and the appraisal cost, or avoid auction nonsense, or get rid of the middleman or selling agent. Just sell us all your crystal. Come here to, I don't know, Barnum and Bailey Brothers. Just sell us all your crystal. We'll give you a great price. Just sell it all to us and do it now. When you are putting like little questions and inquiries into Google and you start seeing all those sites of all the people that want to buy all of that metal or crystal, or maybe it's a precious stone and gems. When you see that, there's a reason for that, right? There's a reason that suddenly all these little businesses and individuals and stockholders are creeping up and creating LLCs to try to hoard everything that's on the market, or try to get it very cheaply off of people as quickly as possible, as much as they can. It's because it's trending up or doing well and they want to get your crystal from you, right? That's why you'll see a lot of that. So that's one of the ways you can tell. Is it doing well? Are there a lot of people trying to buy it?
Brokers.
Or even just anonymously off the internet? Are there suddenly a dozen businesses saying, sell us your crystal? Then, if there's not a dozen businesses saying, sell us your copper, then copper probably isn't doing well right then. But if there's a dozen places saying, oh, you don't need to pay for an appraiser, just give it to us. We'll give you a great deal. It's probably worth something, right? Gold, for instance, if you put that into Google, there is never a time that you will not see people trying to buy your gold at scrap gold prices.
Right.
There's a reason for that. It's always worth something. So just something to think about, just something to put out there. We don't have a lot of light left. I talked a lot. I know we did mention the carnival glass is not crystal.
Yeah, not crystal.
Even though it's so shiny and pretty. I was trying to confuse everyone, but also teach them that is not an example of crystal, oddly enough. These little crystal, this is crystal. See how beautifully clear that is? I'm just going to hold it to the camera. William's just going to stand there and look pretty. But, and see all these little lights? So it's not carnival glass. That's not what's happening. This is the UV refraction of natural sunlight from this right-facing window over this away, hitting through here. So you can see how it kind of sparkles and shines and how amazingly clear it is. So that is an example of crystal. I wish I had like direct light so they could see like all the little rainbows, but I just don't have any right now. Now this, on the other hand, maybe I could just grab the lid carefully. This is glass. This is actually a very durable kitchen glass. Remember how I said about the thickened kind of edges? You can kind of see that here.
Yeah, it does look a lot thicker around the edges.
So molded, they had to work with it quickly, reinforced around its edges, more rounded. And not to say that crystal can't be rounded, it can, but that can be one of the hints, one of the signifiers. So that's just glass. And as you see, no colors coming off of that. It's actually not nearly as clear. Maybe if I hold up like this and this, yeah. I should kind of show them. See how this is almost silver gray?
Right.
And very clear to see through. This is like dull. And it's actually harder to see through. If you look, this isn't a great example because it's got so many ridges. Do we have a piece of crystal with less? Like that little stem vase. The little Tom. Yeah. So here's a little Tom Bohemia. I'll show you that sticker a little bit. So this is crystal. And I'm trying to show with the camera. See when you look through from the front of this, from here to this side, and look back through it to like where William's hand just was. See how that's so easy? See my hand back there? To see through. It's very clear. It's like there's nothing in the way at all. Versus a piece of glass, now you look through and it's not, see, it's kind of hazy. It's not really clear. It's a little bit blurred.
Yeah. So
crystal is very clear. So that's maybe you're in low light conditions like we are right now, and you can't test little rainbow refractions. Also, this tiny little vase is actually heavier than this entire piece.
Yeah.
If I were to pick it up.
Right.
Anything else? This, don't get fooled by glass can be cut. See, this is faceted.
Right.
And it actually isn't crystal. So don't be fooled just thinking just because it's cut, just because it's faceted, those sorts of things that it necessarily is. It doesn't mean it isn't, but it doesn't always mean it is.
That's a good point.
These are glass, but they are so cute. See, no sparkles.
No sparkles.
No UV, no Roy G. Biv. No rainbow. But he's still a cute little froggy.
He is.
Super cute little froggy. Okay, so is that it? Was that good?
I think so.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank y'all.